CFUV listeners, my name is Jason Clonier, and welcome to a Health Jam edition of our show. Today I have with me Elham Ansari, a Ayurvedic practitioner and educator from Awakening Wellness in Victoria. Elham also teaches at the Pacific Rim College in the Holistic Nutrition program and is the dean of the program. I interviewed Elham in December of 2013 and decided to bring her back after her brilliant presentation at the Victoria Gluten-Free Health and Wellness Festival, which took place in February 2014. At the conference, the audience held her hostage on stage, asking question after question as if they were starving for the information she offered. For that reason, it is important to give her even more of a voice on the radio. Today we will be focusing on myths about foods and diet fads. Some of this is going to be really controversial to people because we really get attached to our eating habits, especially when we are told they are healthy. It is important to push away myths created by unfounded statements and information from marketing campaigns used to increase sales. To do this, we may want to ask, where did I get my eating habits from, and where did I get my information from? Well, today we're getting our information from Elham. Elham, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jason.
I mentioned that you spoke at the Gluten-Free Health and Wellness Festival. So let's start with gluten. Now, one of the key speakers there was William Davis, who wrote the book, The Wheat Belly. And on his book, it says, lose the wheat, lose the weight, and find your path back to health. Is it that simple? If I get rid of wheat or if I get rid of gluten, am I going to notice some benefits to my health?
Mm-hmm. So like you were saying, rather than just simply accepting simple statements, it's really good to understand why things are the way they are. And if we look at wheat, the storage protein, which is the gluten molecule, is simply a very difficult to digest molecule. And because of what we've done with taking the seeds from regions that are way further up north than we are, and therefore having them be these super gluten strong molecules, and then further genetically modifying them and having it already be a difficult to digest thing, and then further us not having the proper enzymes to digest it, it just makes it a difficult to digest thing. So yeah, removing a difficult to digest molecule is going to make things easier on digestion, but there's some understanding, there's a little bit of simple logic there involved in terms of understanding our digestion and understanding the attributes of foods and why some of us have a harder time with some difficult to digest things and why some of us don't. And so, like you were saying, rather than accepting a certain trend or fad, it's really good for us to ask for whom and why.
Okay, what kind of foods contain this gluten?
Gluten it's a storage protein that's within the grass family grains. So that's wheat, rye, barley, amaranth. And it's especially in the wheat because we've altered the wheat the most and we consume the wheat the most, right? And the thing is wheat was never meant to be the only grain used. So again, asking, well, what's really going on here? We can see that it's really our overconsumption of a single grain. So it's sort of our lack of our ability to be in good relationship with all sorts of grains and have a, well-rounded diet of all sorts of whole grains and, not just consuming wheat and in its refined form.
Now, is the North American diet so poor that maybe we have trouble digesting this food? I mean, say if I have some granola in the morning with a bunch of fruit, and then I have upset stomach, and I blame it on wheat in my granola. I guess there's wheat in granola.
There isn't wheat in oats,
Okay.
but some oats are processed in factories that have wheat. But what you're saying there is, blaming it, like say if you were to also have a piece of toast and then blaming it on the wheat rather than seeing, if we understand this further knowledge of digestion and how things work, seeing, oh, the fruit don't combine with the oats. So that's probably, actually the poor food combining that has happened there is going to be even more difficult to digest than some wheat. So that's why it's about understanding the whole picture and seeing how things work rather than just saying, oh, wheat must be horrible, let me remove it. Being a heavy and dense molecule, it actually also has the highest amounts of vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids. And so if someone wants to actually build and put on weight and nourish, my teacher always said, wheat is vegetarian meat, all right? So it can, like we said, used appropriately for whom, then it can actually be good and helpful. So it's all about for whom, and there's really no blanket statement because every statement has to apply to the individual and their story.
Okay, so wheat, maybe for some people, we might want to remove it from the diet. Mm-hmm. For others, we might want to add it. Whatever the case, the blanket statement, the removing wheat from everybody's diet doesn't make sense.
We certainly want to remove all processed grains, right? We certainly want to remove all overconsumption of a single grain. We certainly want to remove consumption of genetically modified grains as well. So wheat within diet consisting of a variety of whole grains can be okay. But the thing is most of us, our digestion has been so hindered for so long due to many different factors, which perhaps we'll go into. It can kind of be like a last straw effect, right? The last straw that broke the camel's back. So most people who have gluten sensitivities have at some point definitely overdone it, right? It's easy to get cozy with croissants and lovey-dovey with all the lovely, loaves of bread. And, it's almost like our greatest love affair we've had with a grain. And now we're overcompensating and, having all these feelings of repulsion towards it, right? So that's why we should really look, well, what's happened? Definitely, removing overconsumption of any refined grain is a good thing, but some consumption, once digestion is back to a good place, some consumption of whole and particularly sprouted wheat bread can actually be quite digestible by most everyone. And this is because the sprouting mimics the germination process. And as we said, the wheat molecule is a storage protein meant to germinate the seed over these short growing seasons, right? So it's jam-packed with all this warmth and nutrients and things, and it helps germinate that seed. But the thing is when we just flour it, it becomes this sticky, glutinous substance, hence gluten, right? But if we sprout the wheat grain, then we're actually mimicking the germination process and we're opening up the gluten molecule and therefore making it more digestible.
Okay. Well, I think that is a good argument about wheat and whether we should get rid of it or not. Moving on, unless you want to add something else.
Well, I thought what was really interesting, Jason, is at the Gluten Free Festival, I felt like, aside from Dr. Davis's talk, there wasn't really an investigation of, well, what is really going on here? What have we done? And why do we have this epidemic of a sensitivity? And it was, this big food fest of gluten-free cakes and cookies and all sorts of things. I ate more baked goods than I had in a while. And I actually ended up feeling, just as part of my language, but, crappy. Because the medium is the message. right? So if a celiac person goes and buys out the gluten-free aisle just because they're like, well, it doesn't have gluten in it, and they go home and they eat back, a whole bunch of products made of other grains, other floured grains, they're going to have a similar feeling. Perhaps not in certain cases there's like almost autoimmune responses to gluten, because gluten is particularly glutinous. But it's the overconsumption of the refined grain. It's the heavy, dense nature of all floured grains that makes it difficult on digestion. So that's what needs to be investigated, that looking further rather than just accepting a certain blanket statement.
Yeah, so you're saying like even if I'm eating food without gluten, I can still clog my digestive system with these foods. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move along to the raw food diet. And the statement here is a raw food diet provides enzymes that are essential to healthy digestion. So what they're saying is if you cook your food, you cook your carrots, you cook your broccoli, you cook your cauliflower, you're going to kill all the enzymes and you're not going to get the benefits. What's your response to that statement?
It's really not about what we eat. More and more we're seeing this. It's really about what we're able to digest from what we eat. And since digestion happens in two kind of categories of ways, there's physical digestion and there's chemical digestion. And this is all done by our metabolic fire. So in our core, in our stomach, we have this metabolic fire that has to transform these molecules into molecules that we can absorb and make of use. Now, certain hard vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, even, big chunks of carrots, zucchini, these hard vegetables were actually meant to be at least lightly cooked. And a lot of them, actually, the nutrients are opened up and accessible to us only if heated and cooked. Okay? Now, as far as the lighter raw foods, like your wide array of greens, all your salad greens, all your sprouts, your fresh herbs, your cilantro, parsley, basil, these are much easier to digest. They're going to hit the hydrochloric acid and the juices and they're going to pretty much melt. Whereas the hard raw vegetables, the broccoli, the cauliflower, it's going to be quite strenuous on your metabolic fire to cook these hard raw vegetables. We can kind of look at it as wet logs being thrown on a fire. And now, like we were saying before, Jason, a lot of our digestive fires have been hindered and weakened. So if someone goes and munches on broccoli and cauliflower sticks because, say, they want to lose weight or, they want to feel better, they might actually end up even lowering their metabolic function even more so. And even putting on more weight and even feeling more heavy and sluggish, because we want to keep the digestive fire nice and warm, okay? So we can also think of this in terms of, well, what if it's wintertime? What if it's summertime? And also the individual. Is the individual already quite cold inside, or do they have a ravenous, strong digestive fire that could actually take more raw food? So again, it's all about understanding and all about seeing what is happening for that person and what is right for that particular situation rather than accepting a blanket statement. And there's lots of variation within every statement.
Well, with the raw food diet, I went to the bookstore to check out, some of the books, and actually it was displayed the most, the raw food diet, mm-hmm. So it's got a big market. And I looked at some of the recipes, so they blend and they juice mm-hmm. A lot. Mm-hmm. And does that make it any more digestible? Yeah,
you got it. So like we said, digestion is in two parts. There's that physical digestion and, of the chewing of the actual physical breakdown in the body, and there's also the chemical breakdown. So if we take the raw foods, even the hard vegetables, and we do the blending, or we even juice them and remove the pulp altogether, then it's much more readily accessible to the body. But still, we want to incorporate into our diet just a rich whole foods diet. And we shouldn't fear cooking these hard vegetables in soups and stews and still getting a high amount of chlorophyll-rich foods through our greens, through our herbs. It's really not as complicated as we've made it. And we have to remember there's no one way. We're meant to really have a wide understanding. And it comes down to a really simple, great, simple, awesome diet of the tons of ingredients we have access to. And we've really overcomplicated it. And to answer your question in a quick way, there's no one thing.
Okay, yeah. And I guess we have to remember that cooking is going to help us digest the food. So be careful with the raw food diet. If we can move on to the vegan movement or the vegan diet. Another big one, a lot of people want to go vegan. I have a book called Forks Over Knives, and I use some of the recipes. It's a plant-based whole food cookbook. And on the back cover it says, "The secret is out. If you want to lose weight, lower your cholesterol, and prevent or even reverse chronic conditions such as heart disease and type 2 diabetes, the right food is your best medicine." Thousands of people have cut out meat, dairy, and oils and seen amazing results. So when I read this, I see the right food is your best medicine. I agree with that statement there, but do I want to be cutting out meat, dairy, and oils? Does anybody want to do that? Is vegan good for some people, not good for others? What do you think?
Yeah, so again, we have to look at the attributes of the food and look at the attributes that we hold and see what we need to bring in to balance out what's going on. So if someone is thin and frail and nervous and shaky and needing some grounding and some nourishment, definitely, the right kind of animal protein could do it in a readily available way. The reason why removing animal products has a great effect is because when it comes to animal products and oils, if they are not 100% perfect quality, hormone-free, completely clean, then they're causing a lot of harm and toxicity in the body. As we know, oil and fat holds toxins, right? So in the animal, the fat of it would hold its toxins, and then in us, we further hold those toxins in our fat tissue. And so I always say, if you only have money for two good quality things, let it be your oil and your animal product. Now, you can certainly have an amazing diet that is plant-based. You're going to have to be really good with understanding how to bring in all the right nutrients. One of the main things I see there in my practice is when people remove meat, they're, really great at knowing their plant-based protein sources, like, oh yeah, nuts and beans and all that stuff. But what about the blood? The iron, right? So what we need to make the blood in us. A lot of us are blood deficient. That's a big thing right now. So do beans have blood? I don't think so. So then we need to be really good with having lots of red, deep reds in our diet, like berries and pomegranates and beets, even the deep greens. So generally super chlorophyll rich things like algae and deep greens are also going to have the iron as well. So again, it's about doing it the right way, doing it for the right reasons. Yeah, if someone has cholesterol issues, great thing to go to a vegan diet. If someone is thin and emaciated and forgetful and spacey, they might want to look at how to bring well-rounded proteins into their diet. So again, there's no short answers.
So we covered three of the big diets, right? And we'll move on to some shorter questions. Grazing on mini meals throughout the day, is that good for your metabolism?
What our metabolism likes is it likes to get fully hungry. So meaning you would feel a true hunger in your belly. So at the center of your stomach, you would feel the big metabolic fire, and it's burning bright, and it's saying, "Feed me, Jason, or I will encroach upon your stomach lining." That's the feeling of hunger. And it's best to be hungry before eating. Now, again, depending on the individual, some shouldn't go too hungry. Some should get really hungry before eating. But anywho, once we are fully hungry, our metabolism prefers to be fed about our palms put together. So that's like a pretty good bowl or a pretty nice plate, and it's unique to you. So your own palms put together. That's about 1/3 of your stomach, and that's what your metabolism likes to have come in to be fed once fully hungry. And once we eat, it is best to not constantly disturb and interrupt this metabolic fire. So we want it to go on and do its job of digesting that food all the way down the track. So once it's finished its job, meaning it reached the end of the small intestine and it passed it on to the large intestine, then that metabolic fire is going to come back into the belly, into your stomach, as hunger again. So what a great indicator, hey? No mysteries in life. So you get hungry, you eat a proper amount, you try not to disturb or interrupt it, and then you'll get hungry again later on. And that ends up being around 2, 3, or maybe 4 meals a day for people, depending on, again, their constitution. And of course, it's okay to have a snack if you really want it. So if you really want it, you can have a snack if there's the hunger for it, but not just out of boredom or going on munching and grazing, because then you're going to take the attention of the fire away from the digestion. So constantly grazing can actually lead to completely hindered metabolism, and you're going to end up creating this little itty bitty metabolic fire that's been teased. Because like all things, like yourself, I'm sure, if you show up somewhere, you want to be, you're like, hey, I've showed up. Don't tease me with this little niblet. Right? So you want to feed it and then let it do its work of digestion. Because there's processes that happen all the way down the track. So if we disturb it constantly and we have to keep bringing the attention of the fire back into the belly, it's going to actually hinder the entire digestion process. And once digestion or the juices of digestion leave the food stuff that's being digested, that food stuff is left to spoil, rot, putrefy, and then you're going to have gas, bloating, undigested molecules in your feces.
So basically what you're saying, you eat and then that food's going through your system, and say it's halfway through, then for some reason you want to eat again, and you're not really hungry, but you eat, so you put that in your stomach. So now your stomach's like got to work in the middle, and now it's got to work at the top again, and we want to kind of have our breakfast and then have another meal. Maybe you got to figure it out yourself, I guess. I mean, in North America, we have breakfast, lunch, dinner, but you were saying 4 meals a day, maybe, with your palms, as a measurement. So you figure that out, you let your system do its thing, and you'll get hungry again, and that's your next time to eat, and that can really be a benefit to how you feel.
You got it. And essentially, we may think we can multitask, but our metabolic fire cannot multitask. So it's all about making it as simple as possible for it and just letting it do its job. And it's super easy to support and have awesome digestion if we follow its guidelines, and it's super easy to hinder it and have all sorts of horrible digestion issues. And that is why digestion issues are one of the biggest epidemics right now.
Okay. Now, Elham just showed me a note. She wants to talk about smoothies. So let's talk about smoothies. What did you want to say on that?
Well, earlier you mentioned, having granola with a whole bunch of different fruit in it and say some milk, and then having your piece of toast and then blaming your gas or bloating on the gluten of the toast. So just to speak to that, there again, we're talking about digestion and the digestion's likes and dislikes. So going back to the fact that digestion cannot multitask, we come to the concept of food combining. So essentially, different foods have different agendas in relationship to the metabolic fire, and fruit have to go through a fermentation process. Dairy has to go through a curdling process. And other foods, we can pretty much think of it as, they just go through a cooking process. So the reason why I mentioned the smoothies is because it kind of turned into one of the greatest health phenomenons in terms of, its size, and the epidemic of it. Because the blender is the perfect opportunity to just throw in everything you have all at once. And then it increases the chances for a potential poor food combination. And what's interesting is that we can have the greatest elixirs of the gods, all, just about like however many of the greatest superfoods. And if we don't digest that properly, those too are going to turn into toxins, right? So why have wasted feces, right? Let's make sure, or I guess not wasted feces, but why waste our nutrients in our feces? We want to absorb and digest them, right? We don't want expensive feces. So what happens in the smoothie is, more often than not, we get the fruit in there, we got our berries, banana, we get yogurt in there, so the dairy, get everything all mixed together, and often creating a completely incompatible and undigestible food combination. And another element to that is that often these smoothies are cold and frozen, and one of the biggest likes of digestion is, what's digestion? What is the metabolic fire? Is it hot or is it cold?
It's hot.
It's hot. It's got to be hot. If we cool it down too much, we kill it, right? So that's why that's part of the whole raw food thing as well. Too much hard raw vegetables can get cold. So whether it's too much raw or too much actual like thermally cold, like frozen banana and berries out of your freezer, hitting the system with a tall glass of frozen elixir right in the morning, right in the AM, when what's the body trying to do? It's trying to warm up, right? Engines are starting, systems warming up. So we actually want to give the body something really easy to digest and warm, and kind of a no-brainer there. And so that's what happens with smoothies, is often we get funny food combos, and often they're cold. If we replace the yogurt or milk with almond milk, it can be somewhat more help. It can be okay. It can be fairly digestible. And as far as the fruit goes, if we don't put banana in there, it makes it all much easier, because banana, out of all the fruits, banana really doesn't combine with anything at all. So, you're better off if you have a protein powder in there, or nuts in there, or seeds in there. You're better off with other fruits than a banana or melon. Melon you certainly never want to combine as well.
So I was going to ask you about bananas too. Can bananas do even any harm, by themselves? People love them.
I know people love bananas because they're, sweet, and they're perfectly packaged, and, they even look like the perfect poop. Sorry, I'm talking about poop. I have to talk about it lots in my practice. But often they don't come out as the perfect poop, we can say. And the thing with bananas is, as simple as they seem, they're actually quite complex in the digestion and in what they have to go through. So that's what makes them completely incompatible with any other food. And usually with fruit, like if you eat your fruit on an empty stomach and you have dinner in about 30 minutes, you're probably good to go because that fruit has probably left your stomach. And that's part of the reason why you don't want to have fruit with other food, is because it has a way quicker time. So usually with fruit, we can have it even 20 minutes before our meal, and great as a snack, definitely. But when it comes to the banana, it somehow continues to interfere with the food all the way down the tract and makes it even more difficult to even have as a snack sometimes, because sometimes it goes about an hour or two both ways and combines with everything you've had, like an hour before and an hour after, even more so. It's kind of more of an anomaly. So with banana and melon, you want to definitely keep them pretty far from other food. So about at least an hour and a half before food, and at least a couple hours after food. Banana's an anomaly. Oh, and it's also really heavy and dense and damp forming. Dampness is a word we use often. It's the same way as dairy creates phlegm and, creates eventual like weight gain or colds and things like that. The banana has a similar effect. It has this damp, heavy, dense quality, even though it has this perfect appearance, and everyone loves it. It's actually really difficult on digestion. And if there are digestive issues, especially gas and bloating and things that come from poor food combining, it's best to just try removing the banana for even a few days. See if you feel any better.
And is it because it's soft also that your digestion has trouble? Because your digestion needs some fiber, right? And bananas are mushy, soft? Well,
the soft part makes it kind of damp and dense, but often digestion likes soft. So like a soup or something soft, and that's why, like we said, blending or juicing makes it even easier. Digestion likes kind of soft, no-brainer things. But it's some particular things about the banana and its complexity of what it needs as it goes through digestion, then it just it's not compatible with anything else.
Okay. Well, that's enough talking about bananas. I want to get back to dairy because I got a few in a row here. One of the statements that really made sense to me, or a statement that I think people should notice, is that humans are the only species that drink milk after infancy, and the milk doesn't even come from our own species. Do we need dairy in our diets?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely as humans, we don't produce the enzymes necessary for digesting dairy after weaning. But the milk itself has the enzymes needed to digest it. But when we pasteurize the milk, we lose those enzymes. And so therefore, essentially we're taking in damp, heavy, cold, mucus-forming, undigestible molecule, essentially. But if you can get really good quality, organic, unpasteurized milk, and you have it warmed up with cinnamon and clove and a little bit of turmeric and a little bit of honey, you'll probably do okay with that, because again, we're warming it up, so we're making it less cold and damp, and we're bringing in digestive spices to make it more digestible and cut the mucus. And also, if we have goat dairy, it is much less mucus forming, and it's often digestible by most of us, and it has the enzymes needed to digest it. So yeah, having big blocks of unorganic, low quality cheese and 4-liter jugs of horrible hormoned milk from sad cows is not useful for anyone.
Mm-hmm. And do we need dairy in our diets to grow and maintain healthy bones?
Well, actually, what's interesting is the vitamin A, D, K, and E, all those oil-soluble vitamins, are actually not even in the milk anymore. after everything that happens to it and just the overall deficiency of the animals. So by the time it gets to us, the reason why, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of milk is fortified with those vitamins is because it actually doesn't have them. So drinking milk under the claim of, we need to build our bones isn't really, that's not happening at all, because we're as a nation, we're consuming the most amount of milk and we have the highest amount of the calcium and vitamin deficiency, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, and I see those commercials. Actually, I just canceled my cable today because of this kind of stuff. But I've seen those commercials where those milk commercials where the guy, he stands up to catch the ball and then he just collapses because he doesn't get enough milk, right? Is it better to get your calcium from collard greens, bok choy, spinach, kale, fortified soy milk?
Yeah, and nuts and, so many other things. It's good to get all our goods from all sorts of things. So again, a rich variety of whole foods in their whole form, and making sure we're getting things from all the different elements. So, grains, greens, vegetables, different seeds, and even algae and things like that. What happens with the milk as well, if we recall our food combining, so fruit doesn't do well with other food and dairy doesn't do well with other food, right? So a lot of our difficulty with dairy is not just because we don't have the enzymes to digest it, but it's also because, we're used to drinking a tall glass of milk with dinner. Like, that is absolutely ludicrous when it comes to digestion. You have absolutely now ruined any possibility and hope for that food to get digested. And it's a big, overwhelming, undigestible mess for the poor digestifier who's like, oh my God, what do I do? And then it just leaves and lets everything spoil, and then we get diarrhea or gas and bloating or whatever. So yeah, that's another big part with the dairy, is that we combine it with other things. And so if the dairy is curdled in the form of milk or yogurt, then yes, it can be combined with other food. But yogurt still shouldn't be combined with fruit. Okay. But if it's just milk, then if you're having milk and cereal, you shouldn't chop up a banana or a bunch of berries and put it in there.
Because milk goes through a curdling process and berries and fruit go through a fermentation process.
You got it.
Yeah. Okay, just one more quick thing about drinking milk. Drinking low-fat dairy is better for you than drinking high-fat dairy?
No, generally, we want to keep everything in its whole form. So the part of the fat is it helps actually digest it. So it's there for a reason, right? So in general, we don't want to be removing parts of a food. That's the idea of a whole foods diet, is when we remove parts of a food, it actually has to take from our storages in the digestion process. So if we process, say, a grain from its vitamins and minerals, then it's going to leach from our vitamins and minerals in the digestion. With the dairy, now, if it's like really low quality dairy, yeah, get the skim, because like we said, the toxins and the hormones are within the fat. So at least you're cutting some of that. But ideally, you want to get whole, unpasteurized, organic, grass-fed. Good luck.
All right. Okay.
It's possible. Yeah,
Okay.
there's lots of great, lovely places, especially in Victoria.
Yeah. Now, let's move on to a few quick ones, or maybe they'll be quick. I don't know. Is a glass of wine good for you?
For whom?
Oh.
So wine it's warming. It builds the blood. It's really good at helping move digestion, because again, it's warming. And so if someone, is having wine with a meal or after a meal, it's going to help digest it. If someone has excess heat, say if they have itchy skin and acne and, maybe even, ulcers and acid reflux or high blood pressure, and they drink a bunch of wine, even a glass of wine, all of those conditions can heighten. So again, there's no blanket statement. It's asking, what does this food item hold, and what do I hold, and what's this math gonna look like? All right. So if you drink wine and you get acid reflux, it's not for you. If you drink wine and you notice it's gonna help digest that steak, then great. Right? So, yeah, nothing wrong with a glass of wine.
I almost feel silly asking these questions because you keep saying it depends on the person. But I'm going to continue to ask. I want to get these two items. I'm going to start with salt because that's just huge. And, I look in the store shelves, these bags of chips, 50% less salt and they still taste great. And we got sea salt, sea salt, so this is healthy, so these chips are for you, right? So what do we got to think about when, is salt bad for you? Is it good for you? What do you got to say about salt?
All right, so nobody needs pure sodium. Sodium was never meant to be all by itself. It was always meant to be accompanied by its about 74 mineral friends. Okay? So we definitely need sodium and all the other minerals in our diet. Okay? Minerals are essential for every single bodily function. All right? This is why people go to the Dead Sea and they have miraculous healings. Well, why is that? It's because they go in it and their body, through osmosis, absorbs whatever it needs. Whatever minerals it's lacking, it's going to suck it in. And then it's going to correct whatever dysfunctions are due to its lack of that mineral. So proper mineral balance in the body is needed for everything. High blood pressure, low blood pressure, absorption of fluids, proper hydration, proper lubrication, proper growth of tissues. They're the absolute foundation building blocks. So removal of sodium, pure sodium, must be done by us all. That is going to be great. And bringing in a moderate amount through our diet of unrefined mineral salt is going to be hugely beneficial. The reason why what happens with sodium alone is that we said things that are processed, meaning elements of it have been removed, will then need to take those elements from your body to digest. So because you are mineral rich like the earth, if you take pure sodium, it's going to have an acidic effect within you because it's taking all your other calcium and mineral deposits from you. And so therefore it's going to have an acidic effect. Whereas we want proper mineral balance to have the proper acid alkaline ratio. Having a moderate amount of mineral salt through our food, just enough to make food taste good. And as we know, it brings out all the other flavors, right? And when flavor is out, then we know nutrients are out. If your food is tasting good and it's full-bodied, it has all the tastes, and it's not like any of the tastes are popping out. Like you don't want to taste the salt. You want to be able to taste everything. The salt is a carrier of everything else. And so if you have delicious, well-seasoned food, then you're getting your minerals. And now the difference between the salt from inside of the earth, which I'm referring to as this mineral salt, is that when the salt crystals grow inside the earth, they're carrying all the minerals in as they're going to that deposit. Whereas sea salt is from the ocean, and it's only like the Celtic Sea that has more minerals. Generally, sea salt doesn't have as much minerals as mineral salt. And also, it's going to carry some of the toxicity of our oceans too, right? So you're better off with the mineral salt that grows inside the earth.
So basically, when we're cooking our food, we want to use salt to bring the taste of all the different vegetables and grains and stuff out. But we don't want to taste the salt. And that makes sense, that because that's that's the way our bodies work. We want that nice taste. And but I know myself, if there's too much salt, it's not very appetizing. With that said, I think we're going to end off with this last question. We're going to talk about sugar. I just like you to start off, and there's one particular thing I want to ask you about sugar in a second, but to start off and talk about sugar, is sugar bad for you? That's probably a lot of diets start taking out the sugar, right? So tell us about sugar.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so definitely, just like nobody needs white table salt in their diet, nobody needs processed white table sugar in their diet. But as far as whole sweets, so when we're talking about, sweet root vegetables like yams and sweet potatoes, or even grains are sweet, or fruit are sweet, or dates are sweet, or even maple syrup, or honey, or even unrefined organic cane juice crystals. When you say sugar, I think of the sweet taste. Okay, now we were talking about taste a little bit before. We need all tastes in our diet, and particularly some people need more of some than others and less of some than others. Now, the sweet taste is building. Okay, so meaning it's going to build tissue and build cells. It's going to be lubricating and it's going to be nourishing. It's going to be calming and it's going to be grounding. Also energizing. So, for example, a child going through a very anabolic phase of life, right? Like a baby or a child, there is big anabolic activity happening. Cells are building, right? So this child is not looking for 5-cent candies, okay, to grow and nourish, but maybe in their head, that's the closest thing they can think of, right? Just the same, maybe we can think of chocolate or a chocolate bar or cake faster than we can think of, oh, let's have some yams and sweet potatoes or grains or, nuts to get this building and nourishing attribute that my body is obviously looking for right now, right? So the brain doesn't think like that. It's like, give me a chocolate bar now, right? So if we have a good amount of these hearty vegetables, fruits, grains in our diet, then we're actually going to notice that our ravenous sweet cravings due to overcompensation of not having those whole foods in our diet are going to dramatically lessen. Paying attention to the nourishing element of these sweet tasting foods are needed, especially if we need to build and nourish. But if someone already has a lot of excess on them, if they're already overweight, then they don't need to have so much of the sweet taste in their diet because they don't need to build anymore, right?
So people need to understand that these foods like the yams and the grains, it goes into your body and then the body brings out the sugar in them?
Yeah. So, for example, if a person says, I've decided to cut out all carbs, all things that would even turn into sugar, okay? If that's not suitable for their constitution and their current state, then it's not going to be really good for them. They're going to end up with heat conditions, or they're going to lose too much weight, or create joint stiffness or something, because the sweet taste builds a buffer in the body. So if someone could use that buffer, then it's really good to incorporate whole grains and also like lentils, right? So all the whole grains, lentils, mung beans, the root vegetables. Remember all the awesome root vegetables like rutabaga, turnip, parsnip, right? Not just the yam and sweet potato. But yeah, incorporating these easy to digest carbohydrates is necessary as a part of a balanced diet. For most people, if someone's already got enough buffer, sure, cut the carbs altogether. You'll feel better.
So what I wanted to talk about when it comes to sweets, I saw an episode on TV, 60 Minutes episode. They had these scientists on there that studied the effects of sugar and its effect on cancer. He said that our bodies have these tumors, and these tumors feed off the sugar. So he said, stay away from sugar. When he was asked, do you eat sugar? And he says he does not eat sugar. But with what you just said, does that mean he doesn't eat all those root vegetables and stuff and greens and stuff? So not to get too much into the cancer issue, but like this guy, he's going to the extreme after all his research, right?
Certainly everyone would benefit from cutting. I mean, there was never meant to be such thing as white sugar. It's absolute poison, and the studies that happened as white sugar was being created were atrocious, and they were completely hidden, right? Rats and dogs were dying left and right, and still, the sugar was just put forth, it was pushed by the corporations, right? So white sugar, white salt, completely poisonous effect in the body, creates high amounts of toxicity, free radical circulation, and acidity, and all of those things are going to contribute to disease formation and all sorts of, havoc. But going as extreme as cutting out root vegetables, easy to digest grains, and easy to digest legumes, even, vegetables have carbohydrates in them too. They're more complex carbohydrates, but everything kind of turns into sugar. So it's best to, start with cutting out your refined sugars, and for most of us, a diet consisting of whole sweets, meaning natural sweets and things that haven't been refined and processed, is going to be okay. And even cut out maybe the cane sugar and even the condensed sweeteners, even maybe try that. But going to the extremes of all grains, root vegetables, things like that.
What about honey?
Honey, you can think of honey as also like a sweetener. So it's, if someone has issues with the sweet taste, then yeah, honey is sweet as well. Honey is a little different in that it's has a bit of a heating and warming effect in the body. It's a little different than other sweets. But yeah, if there's sugar issues, then probably cutting out sweeteners altogether. It depends on it. Again, it depends, right?
Depends on the person. All right, then. Well, we went for a while, and we are going to be kicked out of the newsroom pretty soon, so we're going to have to end it there. Elham, I'm going to put this on my website, climatejam.ca. So thank you for listening.